He won't help you here.
What's up, Goth Gamer Nation? Despite what my channel and its many thumbnails may suggest, I'm aware that new games are developed all the time, and from numerous voices outside the cruel, deviant confines of the AAA industry's sprawling megastructures. Elsewhere, in homes, dorm rooms, and trailer parks, creatives and video game auteurs actually elected to make a beeline to their dream project. All this working your way up the ladder shit. They gave themselves over to the abyssal time sink of video game development. I always mean to cover and point out projects in that space that interest me, but the further I stray from the content that I feel my subscribers expect, the more aware I am that there's a trapdoor beneath me that could give at any moment. Perhaps it already did, and I just haven't looked down yet. Also, I just kind of space out a lot and forget things. I found some time to check out a few demos from the June 2024 Next Fest on Steam, and thought I'd mention the ones that impressed or simply intrigued me, captured my imagination. Any omission from here doesn't imply that I thought a particular project was bad or anything. I probably just, didn't get around to it in time. Or I did and I'm lying. Please select whichever option is more reassuring. Corpus Edax, the still upcoming solo dev immersive sim from Louis G. Bento, has an updated demo that functions less like an out-of-context playground and seems like what's shaping up to be a real, honest-to-goodness video game. It takes place in a sort of Verhoeven-esque retro future where humanity has colonized a new planet from which the game gets its title. You play a character that is revived from cryostorage and shoved off to perform their assigned task as a Class C citizen. You don't quite make it there because a possibly dead revolutionary named Jackson visits you in your dreams and instructs you to transport a hit list of the until now unknown figures running the city's government to his successor. So, wanting to continue the game, you say, hell yeah, let's burn this mother down. The city, by the way, being the name of the city you are currently in, it's easy to remember because it's the only city. Though the time spent engaging in typical immersive sim activities, i.e. skulking around through vents or throwing things at enemies triggering chaotic physics, is reduced to a single quest in this demo. I'm very excited to see it gain shape and sentience, some ideas becoming more firm and others sloughing off. I'd love to learn more about its drab, miserable world and see what new things they let me throw at people's heads, causing them to ragdoll in ways that make me happy. Yeah, a few of these are gonna be repeats / updates, so get over it. Coven is a still upcoming retro first-person shooter from Grimpressions that is still in development, and its new demo shows off several changes from the last. It's got some snazzy new lighting, title cards for levels, some new abilities and weapons, as well as an interdimensional shop that you can visit in between levels. Drawing inspiration from games like Blood and Time Splitters, this game concerns a girl wrongly accused of witchcraft, burned at the stake, but resurrected by a mysterious force, becoming an unstoppable magic-drunk tool of vengeance. The plan for this one is to enter early access and release new levels as they are finished. This one taking place in the 1600s, but others will be set at different points in history. Very fun seeing this game come together and find its voice. A voice gleefully encouraging you to tear your enemies limb from limb, bisect them, melt them, knock their legs out, and gobble up their pieces mid-sprint. There's a primal savagery in between the ballet of slow-motion firefights. So definitely give that one a look unless you're, not some kind of sick freak. The Crimson Diamond is an upcoming retro adventure game from Julia Minamata, calling on and expertly mirroring a very specific window of adventure game that utilized a graphics adapter called EGA. The clearest source of reference for this would be the 1989 game The Colonel's Bequest. It's almost uncanny how much This game looks and feels like a lost Sierra game from the late 80s, perfectly bottling the same cozy energy and color palette. It follows an amateur geologist and detective named Nancy Maple, who travels to a ghost town called Crimson in Ontario, Canada, in order to find proof that there are diamonds in the area, after a massive one is curiously found in the belly of a fish. Much of your time will be spent snooping through belongings, eavesdropping on conversations, and avoiding death at the hands of a mysterious killer every now and then. Possibly a barrier to some who are old head game illiterate, it's controlled using a text parser, meaning you have to type instructions for Nancy in order to get her to do anything. You want her to open a door, you gotta type open door. And if there are two doors, open the door on the left, and so forth. It's not as daunting as it seems and becomes second nature by the time you're nearing the demo's end. Okay. I'm very impressed by this project and how it pays homage while softly modernizing this era that is sort of a lost art. I mean, the conditions in which you would make a game and it came out looking like this are gone. So it's a machine entirely powered by love. Deep Sleep Labyrinth of the Forsaken is an upcoming survival horror point-and-click adventure game mashup of sorts from Script Welder. You play as a girl named Amy who is searching for her brother through a lucid dreamscape he may have been lost to, that of course frequently becomes nightmarish. I've not played them, but I believe this developer has other games set within this same world, but this one is a standalone story. I think the mix of gameplay elements is what intrigued me the most, reminding me a bit of like Silent Hill meets Secret of Evermore, where it's got the heart of an adventure game, but light combat, item management, and RPG elements on top of all the psychological scary business. I think your first weapon in Secret of Evermore was also a bone. It could have been intentional. It maintains a pretty consistent eerie atmosphere, playing into the dream logic and using that to propel the plot forward, even with its sort of cutesy pixelated art style. Short demo, but I really enjoyed my time with it and was surprised at how effectively tense it could be, which is harder than you'd think to pull off in a general sense. For me, I'm always tense, so I've built up like an immunity. I'm untouchable, but constantly on the verge of a panic attack, so it evens out. Elation For the WonderBox 6000 is an upcoming first-person dark comedy adventure game from Digital Tchotchkes. And looking back at the list of games I got here, it appropriately functions as a sort of surreal commentary on gamers and their addiction to nostalgia. Like Threshold, this is a very, very brief tasting of the game, but even in that, it promises a lot of unique and oddball mixed media animations that appear to be clay figures in a sort of mock stop motion. It opens with our protagonist penning a long-winded treatise on video games as the 9th art, its crowning achievement being an obscure game stranded on a vintage game console. It then comedically loses any lingering air of legitimacy when we pan out to see it posted on an online forum, only to then receive an escalating stream of insults and death threats. With the help of a little guy that lives in his wall, he decides to head into town to look for a copy of this game. It's another project that draws me in with its sort of hyper-specific vision and voice. A dreamlike adventure centered around a Reddit poster obsessed with some fleeting memory of adolescent happiness, despite the fact that they've already invented pornography too, and you could experience it all on a Cronenbergian flesh box. Fallen Aces is the now released in early access immersive sim from Trey Powell and Jason Bond. Goon smashing simulator, rat throwing simulator, hit Gianni with a pipe simulator. Another game I've covered before but felt compelled to remind you of since its first chapter, essentially a third of the game, is available to play in exchange for money, and I was making my way through it and just marveling at, firstly, how fucking beautiful this game is. Maybe that first demo sort of distracted me with how silly and memey it was, but playing part of it in its complete form, it was like I was really seeing it for the first time. So much charming detail and lovely design everywhere you look. The cutscenes replicating the Ben-Day dots of vintage comics, and the voice acting, the music, it all perfectly brings this premise to life. And it's still really silly and takes every available opportunity to play into the camp of its setting, but it knows when to play something straight as well. There has to be some, baseline of straightness so the funny bits are still funny. Someone is trying to take out members of a crime-fighting organization named Aces, and now they're coming after a detective named Michael Thane, who attempts to evade his would-be assassins and learn who's targeting Aces, while being helped from afar by a mysterious vigilante named Nightwave. Appropriately, you can make your way through areas playing it stealthy, climbing through windows, hopping from patches of shadows, and karate chopping enemies into a nap, and it's just as valid walking in through the front door with a shotgun, though weapons don't last forever and inventory space is limited to 3 spaces, so it's up to you to make the most of those. Kudos to the devs for continuing to see this project through. It's very apparent that a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and piss, and went into this. Yeah, kind of annoying that you can't just play the whole ass game from day one, but if it being in early access is so this level of care and consideration can be put into the entire thing, then I get it. I'm not going to say it, because I don't want to jinx this thing, but, there is a known, documented curse, some would say, concerning games of a certain genre tag, and so far, a certain game, not saying it's this one, seems to have skillfully evaded that curse. HollowBody is an upcoming third-person survival horror game from Headwear Games that borrows familiar gameplay and the fixed camera angles from the better entries in the Silent Hill and Resident Evil franchises. You see, I used to like games, now they're all weird and scary. Kidding! Not really. And renders it through a dystopian UK sci-fi lens, simultaneously retro and modern. It follows a black market shipper named Micah, who is stranded and left to fight for survival in the crumbling ruins of a suburb. You pick up little bits of plot and world building that give insight as to why this place was walled off and forgotten, painting a picture of a slow death from disease, famine, and infighting. While it does seem to expertly feed into the nostalgia for the early 2000s survival horror greats, down to the sort of PS2 grit of its art style, it's still grounded in this new and intriguing future. There are earthly things that make sense, but also a world outside this place we don't have direct eyes on, where things like hover cars and mechs are commonplace. You can sense that this may as well be an alien planet we've landed on, even though it's just the graveyard of our own. Of course, it would be a shame if there wasn't some gruesome force reanimating and twisting the town's previous occupants, as well as a touch of dream logic motivating our protagonist. In between environmental and item-based puzzles, you'll have to face off against the strange husks of former humans in occasionally tense and claustrophobic combat. Me when I would misbehave at the mall. Honestly, I got nothing but good things to say about this one. It's just baffling that this hugely atmospheric, pitch-perfect love letter to survival horror could be produced by a solo developer, and I look at the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake and I find it to only be repellent. Judero is an upcoming ARPG from Tala and Jack Co. and King Spooner, and it is based on the folklore and history of the Scottish borders. So the first thing you're probably going to notice is the wild mixture of clay models, paper cutouts, and I think action figures as well. For something so steeped in ancient history and mythology, it's paired with this charming modern DIY vibe, looking like a cross between Jan Schwenkmeyer and I don't know, Action League now.
The flesh, he's super strong and super naked.
The titular Judero wanders about taking on quests from villagers, anything from stopping a monster from eating livestock to retrieving a stolen and very sturdy baby from a spider woman. Combat is a big focus, and on top of hacking and slashing, you have the ability to possess creatures and force them to fight each other, or use them to bypass obstacles you can't yourself. The demo shows off a couple boss fights that add bullet hell elements and require precise timing for dodges. Sometimes that felt a little janky or undercooked, but I'm more so attracted to the wild inventiveness of it all. If you're not sold yet, it opens with a heartfelt parting of Judero and a floating pink bunny, and I couldn't really understand the emotion I was supposed to be feeling. It seemed really sad and also kind of funny, and I mostly just felt like I was going insane. So if that's your vibe, that's a possibility.
Even though I leave, I will ever be in your service.
Mouthwashing is an upcoming psychological horror walking sim from developer Wrong Organ, the same team responsible for 2022's How Fish Is Made. This was one of the more immediately impressive demos for me because of its unique creative voice and sort of high concept Twilight Zone on acid premise. It's that distinct sort of auteur signature that you don't come by all that often. In some distant future, the crazed captain of a space freighter attempts to take himself and his crew out, but winds up leaving himself limbless, incapable of speech, and in constant agony, while everyone else is alive to deal with him, as well as mounting starvation and infighting. Their only chance at survival or a slower death may have been to bust open their cargo and hope it's full of food or medicine, but instead they find they've been hauling thousands and thousands of bottles of mouthwash. Not good for much else beyond getting obliterated on. The demo plays out non-linearly, cutting to scenes before and after the crash, as well as hallucinations in between, muddling the timeline and reality of the events we bear witness to. Gameplay seems to be minimal, allowing for the odd puzzle or bit of interactivity, but it's really carried by its vibes, which hopscotch between depressing, absurd, goofy, unsettling, and beautiful. Shifting gears a bit, The Operator is an upcoming puzzle simulation type game from Bureau 81. The entire game is played through a PC desktop, putting you in the place of an operator at the fictional Federal Department of Intelligence. You essentially remotely handle detective work for characters that call in and email you evidence and clues. For example, someone needs a perp that appeared on a security camera committing a homicide ID'd, so you can enhance their license plate and run it in the database to find its owner. But predictably, this soon becomes weirder and involves a pattern of supposed alien abductions, as well as a hacker feeding you information. It's a really simple and elegant idea that I feel like a lot of games in the mid to late 90s tried to pull off with FMV, but never quite nailed it. Really looking forward to seeing what a full release of this would look like. It reminds me a lot of a more straightforward and serious take on what the game Home Safety Hotline did. And by the way, if you've not heard of that one, it came out at the start of this year, and I was gonna mention it in a video like this that I did not end up doing. But if the gameplay of this intrigued you, but you wanted the plot to be more deranged, then I definitely recommend Home Safety Hotline in addition to this one. Another point-and-click game with a lovely hand-painted art style is Ophelia's Chapter from Red Tier Games. This game has a more rough, sketched look to it, and seems to be making a more concerted effort to frighten and unnerve you. Altogether more story-driven, putting you inside a fairy tale-like ghost story, drawing inspiration from authors like Neil Gaiman. This one immediately sort of grabbed me by the collar and prevented me from looking away, opening with a woman named Ophelia, getting a visit from her friend Meredith, who is soaked from the rain. After instructing her to towel off in the bathroom, she gets a call from another friend named Jacob, who claims he's at the hospital right now with Meredith. Like, we've all been there, right? Just completely doubting your own sanity or awareness. The gearworks of your mind frozen on a tiny bug that's squealing. The parts you get to play here show off not only item-based puzzles, but a sort of alchemical potion-making mechanic that I'm intrigued to see more of. There is clearly a complex plot at work here, and the chunk we see is missing a lot of context, but it clearly has something to do with alternate dimensions, dark rituals, and cultists. Whatever it is, it's apparently a job only this crystal mommy can handle. Roman Sands Rebuild is a first-person Game from developer Arbitrary Metric. Something of a remake or reskin of an earlier project, now with a downright indecent indulgence in the aesthetic of millennial gaming. You play as a person of some kind that wakes up on an island that is home to an opulent beach resort full of angry guests that need you to do their bidding because you seem to work here, or at least they seem to think you do. Making matters worse, the day appears to reset every couple minutes and seemingly mundane tasks will peel back further layers of this surreal dreamscape. That's all I'll say on the plot because I don't understand it fully. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a more frenetic, breakneck hodgepodge of game design out there. It's like it's smushed together not so much mechanics or themes, so much as specific stimulations. It knows what feels and sounds good, and it gives it to you until your eyes bleed. Rose Cottage is an upcoming point-and-click adventure game from Hollow Lane Games and has you exploring a haunted mortuary in the role of a Sherlock-esque detective named Detective Inspector Edward Barrington. It sticks pretty close to the conventions of the genre. You point and click around collecting items and finding wacky ways to bypass a series of locked or barred doors. It also nails the dry humor and tone of later Sierra games. Sometimes this can be a little grating, but thankfully it will come in waves. Every once in a while, between eye rolls, one of Ed's one-liners or skepticisms will get a snort out of me.
If there are any spirits present, give me a sign. Any sign at all.
I do find it fun that it's effectively an out-and-out ghost story in a Victorian mansion, but the lead character is an immovable skeptic. Obviously, the biggest draw that's hard to ignore is that the hand-painted art style is absolutely gorgeous. I can't recall a similar game that was this aggressively 4K. Every room dripping with detail, dynamic light and shadow, and bits of animation. Don't have too much to say about this one, just very charming and pretty to look at. It's like an HD remake of an old adventure game that never existed until now. Threshold is an upcoming horror walking sim from developer... It's always weird when it's just like some guy's name. It's like elsewhere it's some, mega studio with like 100 people. And then it's just like Julian Ivail. Anyway, this aims to be a short and atmospheric experience, and appropriately this demo is very brief and explains nearly nothing about its intriguing world. You play some kind of maintenance worker that's arrived to a mountainous region to assist in the function of a train that never stops moving. For some reason, this orientation is imparted without speaking, as the two characters communicate through notes written down. There is the ever-present threat of oxygen shortage, requiring those who work here to bite down on these glass-looking air tubes. Also, some weird shit going on in this window. I don't know what the fuck that's about, but it says a lot that this cruelly brief glimpse at Threshold has me hooked and eager to see more and experience further dental agonies. Zero Protocol is an upcoming first-person sci-fi survival horror game developed by R_Games. I was of course drawn to it because it held the tag Immersive Sim, which at this point I just see as arrogant, as a challenge to me, but I do see System Shock as a clear reference point in both the theme and the sort of non-linear problem solving and exploration, finding door codes scrawled in blood and poring over increasingly deranged inter-office emails to slowly make your way from room to room in a very well thought out setting. There's also notes of classic Resident Evil, with its abundance of sterile labs, sparse supplies to be managed, and familiar UI. The look and feel of it is really consistent and fun. Like not quite PS1, more like a HD Game Boy Advance. You ever play that game they did for Ballistic X vs. Ever? It's like that, but better in every conceivable way. I was trying to sell you on this game, but I see now I should compare it to things that people like. You've got your health, sanity, and flashlight power to maintain as you're confronted by the now crazed employees of a top secret facility. It doesn't really reinvent the wheel with what it's going for, but it's simply a charming reflection of a creator's influences and preferences with games. Very cool project with a clear, confident vision, resurfacing a sort of primal unease I had playing Doom as a child. And it's got puzzles that are just complicated enough that I feel a sense of accomplishment on completing them, and the time I spent admonishing myself for just not having this inherent gamer literacy that everyone but me seems to have was minimal. Well, that's all of them for now. I think I should make this a sort of regular segment, but I don't want to bear the weight of that promise. So I'll leave it as an idea floating in the ether. Sure, would be cool. Hopefully you at the very least enjoyed sitting through that, or maybe one of these is officially on your radar. In that case, I am sure there are ways, there's a course of action in which to support these types of things. Wishlist the game or contribute, money through whatever platform they accept that sort of thing through. Do something. Like for once. And take a shower.